Lighting is just as, if not more, important than the camera that you film on. Bad lighting is going to make high-end cameras look terrible, and amazing lighting is going to make your smartphone look like it can film the next Hollywood blockbuster. The problem is that lighting can get expensive. Film lighting can cost in the thousands and quickly break any budget. So what do you do when you don't have access to the lighting kit that they used in the last Christopher Nolan film? There are countless ways to light a scene. It just really boils down to what you have access to and how you work within your limitations. For instance, if you film inside and shoot directly into a window on a bright sunny day, unless you have a vast amount of lighting equipment on hand, then either your window is going to look like a giant block of white, or your talent's going to look like they're in witness protection and just be a blackened outline. So if you're working with limited gear, don't shoot into a window. But maybe you can instead utilize the lighting of the window as the source for your talent. We're going to explore a few tricks you can do to light your scene by using affordable solutions you may already have lying around. Unless you're filming in Alaska in the winter, there's a great chance you've got access to the brightest light around, the sun. This giant ball of fire that we rotate around once every 365 days or so also happens to be an amazing light source. If you have zero artificial lights available to you, then use the sun. So why would you ever use any other light? Well, while the sun is an amazing light source, it's also a beast to work with. It moves, it's harsh, and good luck moving it on your own if it's not exactly where you want it to be. It's not exactly the most controllable light around. The key to working with it is to modify it. If you're filming on a cloudy day, God might already be doing this for you. A cloudy day is a filmmaker's best friend, because a solid cloud cover is one giant layer of diffusion. The problem with the sun without diffusion is that the harshness means that your shadows will be just as harsh. Just look at your shadow on the ground in the middle of the day. If it's full sun, then the lines in that shadow are going to be so sharp you could cut a block of cheddar cheese on them. Sharp shadows mean that the lighting isn't the most flattering, plus your poor talent's probably going to be squinting so hard you're going to be questioning if they're sleeping. So if you're filming outside on a sunny day, you either want to find a shade of a tree or the cover of a small roof, or bring your own diffusion. Don't worry, we're going to cover some cheap diffusion options later. The idea of filming into the window applies outside. If you're filming in a shaded area, but behind it is an area that's in full sun, it's either going to be a wall of white, or the talents can be a blackened blob. The better scenario is to film inside and use the natural light through a window as your key light source. You're still going to want to explore diffusing the light, but this way you're not filming from a darker space to a brighter space like you might be outside. Plus, the light is coming off angle from the sun, so it's bounced and therefore already a little bit softer. Not to mention your talent is much less likely to squint because instead of looking into the bright light around them, it's hitting the side of their face. What if you're filming in a windowless room, or it's night, or you do in fact happen to be located in Alaska during the winter? Well, don't worry, there are options for you too. The goal with our lighting is to find something that's going to be bright enough for you to light your talent. One cheap option is that you might already have lying around is a work light. That's right, the lights that you see on a construction site can also be used great on a film set. Just like using the sun, the key is to modify them. They're strong, but they're also harsh. The other thing to look for is to make sure that you're aware of the color temperature of the light. Some are tungsten, some are daylight. There are even some where you can dial in your own color temperature. Whatever temperature they are, you just want to make sure that the settings in your camera match the color temperature of the light, as well as make sure that the rest of the light sources in the shot match. There's nothing worse than filming in an area that's lit by daylight, but your talent is lit by tungsten or orange light. Something in that shot's going to look bad, so make sure you match the temperature of your lights. You also want to make sure it's not a light that's going to flicker. Some LED lights flicker, so do some tests with your camera to make sure that you don't have any flicker. Now that we've talked about a few light sources you can use, it's time to explore a few ways to soften up those lights. Diffusion basically takes your harsh light and makes it much more appealing for what you're shooting. There are some instances where you want a harsher lighting, but if you have a person in the shot, then you most likely want to soften the light. In Hollywood, they use specialty fabrics called scrims and nets, but those fabrics are not something you're going to find cheap. The idea is that the scrim catches the harsh lighting that either the sun or your lights are putting off, and then it spreads it out, so it's not so direct. The person's then being lit by the fabric as opposed to the light that's shooting at it. When used correctly, this makes for a much more beautiful light with shadows that roll off as opposed to the sharp lines that you're used to. But frankly, you're here to see how to pull off these effects without dropping the big bucks. So let's explore a few ways to modify lighting on the cheap. The first and easiest way to diffuse light is to bounce it. This has a very similar effect to diffusing it through fabric, but it's not as controlled as hitting the fabric directly. The easiest way to bounce a light is to point it at the ceiling, and then use the light bouncing off to light your talent. This light tends to spill all over though, so if you're looking to light just a certain portion of a person, then you're going to end up fighting the lighting. This allows for beautifully soft light though. In fact, you're looking at a shot lit in this very way. Instead of bouncing it off the ceiling, you can also direct the light onto the wall and bounce off of that. You just need to make sure the wall you're bouncing off of doesn't have a color painted on it. If you use a wall painted in a color other than white, the color of that wall is going to also spill into your talent. So if your wall is green, suddenly your talent may look like they just got off a boat and are fighting seasickness. Don't have a white wall? Good news! You can apply this concept to any surface that's white. White poster board, foam bead board, a sheet, really anything that's large, solid, and white. The larger the surface, the softer the light's going to be, but also keep in mind that the larger it is, the more it's going to spill everywhere. So if you're not wanting to light an entire room, then maybe you're going to want to bounce off of a smaller piece of beadboard so you can control the lighting a little bit better. You can also do the same thing we were talking about earlier and just directly diffuse the light. Don't have scrims lying around? I guess that's why you're here. Well, what if I told you that you could pull off a similar look by using a sheet or a polyester shower curtain? You once again want to make sure that the fabric's white and non-patterned, but both of these items are going to work similarly to a scrim. The downside is that these fabrics aren't tailored to work with lighting, so they're not going to be as scientifically accurate with how they affect the light. A sheet might let less light through if it's a thicker fabric, or a shower curtain might pull some of the warmth off of the light you're using. But the average viewer is not going to notice, and these are going to be significantly better than if you hadn't used any modifications in the first place. Finally, there's the Booklight, but not that kind of Booklight. This one's more of an advanced move, but you're up for a challenge, right? The Booklight is the king of the soft light. It's double diffusion at its finest. You need a lot of light to pull it off. But if you light with a Booklight, then you're guaranteed to win the next Oscar. Oscar win not actually guaranteed. A Booklight is when you take your main source of light and point it towards a surface to bounce the light. Then, between the bounced surface and your talent, you're going to place another piece of fabric to soften it even further. It's applying both the bounce and the diffusion methods to lighting. The reason it's difficult is because you need to play around with the placement of all the different items, and you need a pretty strong initial source. The light needs to be strong because with every step of diffusion, you're losing some of your light output. So if you try to do a Booklight with a single weaker work light, you might not have enough light to properly expose your camera. It's definitely worth the efforts though, and I would encourage you to play around with it. One last thing to consider with lighting is that sometimes you don't want to add light to a shot. You instead want to take it out. Lighting is more about modification than illumination. Typically, you'd remove light by using a tool called a flag, but this is the easiest piece to substitute. A flag is literally just a piece of black fabric pulled over a metal frame. It literally just blocks the light, just like the blinds on a window or the brim of your hat blocks the sun off your eyes. So how can you block light without a flag? Anything that blocks light can be used as a flag. The most obvious is to use a black blanket. I've used moving blankets in the past. I've even used a book on a shelf. Whatever you're using to block the light though, you just want to make sure that it's not something colored in a way that is bouncing light back into the shot. It needs to be something dark and solid. Beyond that, go crazy with what you use to block the light. If I'm blocking the light in a shot, it's often to pull some distracting light off the background or off of my talent. What if you have a few bucks to invest in some lighting? What would I recommend? I'd suggest looking at the Aputure 60D, 100D, or 200D. They're not the strongest lights around, but they put off a great amount of light that's going to hold up to almost any of the methods above. And they don't break the bank, ranging from $170 to $300. I actually very regularly use a 200D as my main light and have been incredibly pleased with the results. You can also get an affordable light dome from Aputure and other companies that are going to do a similar job to what you might get with light shine through diffusion. The plus side to this setup is that you will have everything all in a single stand, and it is so much easier to work with. If you don't have the money for one of those lights though, then subscribe to my channel for my next video, the $25 lighting setup. Doubt the quality of that type of light? What if I were to tell you that this whole video was lit using $25 worth of lighting? This overview only touches the tip of what you can do with lighting, but learning how you can affordably light a scene and then modify the lighting you use is the best way to equip yourself to experiment. Above all though, remember this, it's not about the gear, it's all about the story. See you next time.